Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favourite newspaper, head to Cricinfo, and maybe a blog you'd like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Well, that is what the best of cricket is currently doing. They go out daily to find the newest cricket coverage and the best stories from any publication in the world. And when they can't discover what they want, they also hire some of the best writers to produce their own great stories. You can get the best of cricket via their website or on WhatsApp. They find cricket's best stories and give them to you every day. Morning, everyone, and welcome to the Scoreboard. I'm Jared Kimber. Just want a quick recap. I think it's worth having a look at the entire series for a moment here. Remember when India couldn't bat and they were terrible? Then Australia couldn't bat and they were terrible. And Marnus was bowling bouncers, and this was the most embarrassing thing that had ever happened to Australia. Virat Kohli was back. Steve Smith was finished. Then Australia were really good with the pink ball. Travis Head is even better. Mohammad Siraj is a villain. And India were now frauds who had got lucky in the first game. Then the Gabatoir was back. And somehow within that, Australia drowned in their own momentum. We get to the MCG, Australia regained the momentum. Virat Kohli is finished and Steve Smith is back. India cannot bat until they did. Australia are setting a declaration until they aren't. This is a number 11 pitch, where now I think the most likely result is for Mohammad Siraj to tie the game, having run out Virat Kohli for the final wicket. It's been a bit of a ride, hasn't it, this series so far? At 91 for 6, I remember watching Alex Carey get bowled, and my first thought was that that's a great ball for Bumrah, and it's, kept a little bit low and everything else. My first thought was, what the hell have we been watching? It just feels like it's been all over the shop. Every time someone has told me it is going to be a very important first session, the first session has not mattered at all because something else has happened that is far more baffling later on. Tomorrow should be a very important first session. It may not matter at all. Let us get to the scoreboard part of the show. If you've got any questions, please put them in. Obviously, super chats are the easiest ones to get to. But let's have a look at what we have. Why is this not coming up? No, that's the wrong one. There we go. So Bumrah goes past 200 wickets today. He has the best average of any bowler in the history of the game with 200 wickets. I don't think, I could be wrong, I think someone else has taken 200 wickets at a lower average in their career, but not from start to finish the way that he currently has. So we got him down at 19.51. There was an over that he bowled to Usman Khawaja where I was just like, this is absolutely pointless. Like, what he's bowling is so much better than what you could ever reasonably imagine any sort of batter would be able to hit. It really is an absolute master. I thought India could have had Australia 20 for 4, right? 25 for 5 today with the way they bowled early on. It's credit to them that they didn't do that thing that sometimes happens in the third innings where you get a position where you put some pressure on early, but because you're behind in the game, it kind of fizzles out. That could have easily happened when they didn't get those early wickets. I've seen that happen so many times before in cricket, and yet that is not where this went. It went in a completely different direction. And a lot of that comes down to Jasprit Bumrah's just relentlessness. Yeah, that's the word I was going for. Match factor for pace bowlers. So you can see, despite he has the highest average, Glenn McGrath's match factor is ridiculous. That would be playing on a lot of flat pitches and still being Glenn McGrath is a big part of it. Again, Dale Steyn again played in a lot of flat pitches era. So I think one thing with Bumrah is that he has played in a much better era for pace bowling altogether. And so his match factor is not quite as impressive as some of the others, but there's no scrubs on this list. Interesting to see just how high up Jason Gillespie is here, by the way, too. And on match factor, I think what we have here, though, is of recent times, he's taking it to a whole nother level. So we can certainly see now that over the last little while, he's hit a huge new peak. So it'd be interesting to see if he keeps that up because, we're talking about being, what's that? over the last 10 to 15 test matches. He's about 70% better than the other bowlers. So if he keeps that up, he'll be good. Of course, he's going to have to keep it up because in this test, he's bowled the most balls, or second most balls that he has in a test match so far. But there is a chance he will bowl the most balls and he will go past the Oval in 2018. He's been pretty lucky that he's played in an era where there aren't that many longer test matches in general. Like, on top of the fact that the bowling era, they're also shorter matches, and that he's quite often played in 5-person bowling attacks. So, bowlers who bowl in 4-person bowling attacks are going to be overbowled quite a bit. He doesn't always have that. Although it is fascinating to look at the way he was used today. I don't think I remember having this conversation a long time ago with sort of the early analysts that were coming through in the game of, with your strike bowler, what is the best way of using them? And we have obviously in Test cricket tried to bowl longer spells, right? So your opening bowler bowls for 6 overs. You then they then are taken off for 6 to 8 overs to come back again for another 6 overs, let's say. Then later on, there'll be a long spell where they're out of the game and everything else. Whereas actually, if you look at the way that, say, the best way of using Rashid Khan in a T20 game, right? Or just Bumrah in a T20 game is probably 1 over up front, 1 over at the start of the middle, 1 over at the beginning of the death, and 1 over right at the end, so that they are a constant threat. And what we have seen so far is that that's not how test bowlers have been used. But that did seem to be the pattern today. So the red ones are Bumrah. There's obviously a few missing here with maidens. We haven't quite got the right graphic going for this one again, especially in Test cricket. It works much better in T20 cricket. But you could see spell, rest, spell, rest, spell, rest, like over and over again, which meant that there was no stage where Australia were going to be batting a long period of time where he wasn't bowling. I think this is something that we've seen with genuine fast bowls at times in first-class cricket and Test cricket, but it hasn't been something that we've seen enough of in Test level with just your most prominent strike bowlers, which is stretching their overs out over the period of a day. Perhaps some of this also came. Let's have a look. Where's Akashdeep? So yes, Akashdeep obviously went on and off the field, so he doesn't bowl again. So perhaps there's an extra spell in here of Bumrah coming back for 1 extra over. Then he comes back for another over again. So it was probably more tactical, although there might be an element of the other seamer not bowling a lot at that point as well. But you certainly see from this just the ability to be able to use that. But if you look at it, there's also a fair bit of Siraj bowling throughout the whole day. So this isn't what you see sometimes, which is a little more blocky. They went with a little bit more open. And it's interesting because Rohit's got a lot of flack for tactics in this series. This is the kind of tactics I really like, just because I think it uses your best players far better than how we have traditionally used them in Test cricket. Siraj's average versus the top 6 and the bottom 5 in this series. So we could see he took a bunch of early wickets in Perth, and then really hasn't been a huge factor against them until, again, taking a couple here in Melbourne. So there's been a lot of talk about how good he's been against the tail. And why that's more interesting is that if you look at this series, he's averaging 29.45 against the top order. And generally, and against the tail, generally he's averaged 33. Whereas against against the top order in his career, he's averaged 38. And then that goes down to 17. Is that right? Or is that the opposite? Has that got mixed up? I swear I read this graphic earlier and it was different. Anyway, the point being is that his pattern hasn't really matched up here. And I think what happens is we over-index. And so almost every time I've done a live, someone has gone on and on about this. The first thing I would say is taking wickets to the tail is still really important. And when someone does that, it's used as a like something to hit them. You want your players. One of the things that sort of differentiates great bowlers from very good bowlers is quite often that very good bowlers are good against the top order, but don't have the ability to cash in against the tail. So I think of Freddie Flintoff is one. I think it was Freddie Flintoff I looked at once that had that. And Hazelwood used to be another one who used to really struggle against the tail. So your ability to be able to do that all the way through the series, all the way through, is actually really important. False shots in the third innings. Just worth pointing out that Akashdeep actually had the most false shots off him again. One stage he had one that was played into the ground that went over leg stump, where he must be like, I think if that happens and it misses leg stump by the amount they did, I think I just walk off. He's just bowling really, really well, and it's not working. The question is whether he's bowling the wrong length, and so he's bowling a little bit too short. It doesn't feel to me like he's bowling too short, but there you go. And the other interesting thing with Akashdeep is that in first-class cricket, he has absolutely no problems with left-handers, and that has not translated. We do see sometimes early on a pattern like this where over the first, let's say 5 or 10 tests, you'll see someone who really dominates either left-handers or right-handers. And I've never really understood how that happens in test cricket. But maybe it's just the way that we take wickets in clusters, or maybe or what it means. I wouldn't be too worried about this. The one that I always remember is Jack Leach, who I think used to average like 20 in first-class cricket against right-handers and 32 against left-handers. And in test cricket, that was exaggerated, far worse. But their pattern was already set. If there's no pattern, I'm less inclined to worry about it. But it is very interesting. False shot in the third innings. Did we show you this to show Scott? What a moment of Scott Boland, by the way, where he'd batted so long that he was unsure what to do. So he asked for gloves, because that's what batters do, right? And yet, when the gloves were delivered to him, he only took one. It's like he didn't even realize he could take both if he had to. But I think seeing Stark, I know Stark didn't bat that long, but seeing Stark, Boland, and Cummins up here with only 16% false shot percentage, I think to me suggests that tells you a lot about this wicket and when it is good to bat on and when it's not good to bat on. The other thing I would point out here is this has Smith at a 17% false shot percentage. These things are very subjective. I felt like he did a lot of clothing the ball up in the air and mishitting the balls that just didn't go anywhere, and getting away with it. That doesn't seem to be in here. I thought he was, for someone who made 100 in the first innings and looked really good, he looked remarkably poor in this innings. But yeah. And Scott Boland, most balls faced in a test innings. So I put this tweet out. Actually, I put this tweet out early, and then, or this Blue Sky. What do we call the things on Blue Skies? Let's just call them tweets. But I put it out saying that in the test match so far, the 3 number 11s have batted for more than 90 minutes. It's now more than 2 hours. The 3 innings by number 11s. Remarkable. I haven't been to a test match, or I haven't covered a test match like this since the Nottingham test match where Jimmy Anderson made 70 and Muhammad Shami made a 50. 70? 80? Whatever Jimmy Anderson made. But Scott Boland in 36 balls in the first innings, 65 in this innings. He does, though, weirdly enough, string together good games back to back because, it's good batting performances because in 2022, he had 33 balls and 13 balls. And look, I know 13 balls is not massive, but it does show you that when he finds batting form, Scott Boland, he holds on to it for one entire test match. But remarkable to see that two of his 4 best innings, I suppose, have come in the same test match. And Nathan Lyon, a high score of 41. Probably, I think we've been seeing Nathan Lyon over a long period of time get a lot better at batting. But he's probably still a number 10. Do you know what I mean? He's never got to the point where you're like, well, he should be batting ahead of Stark, or he's on that Stark or Cummins level. But I've always felt that he's getting slightly better. But again, by that stage, there's a lot of inconsistent bounce. In fact, I think we've got a graphic on the inconsistent bounce in a second. But once you get in and you get set, it's a very good wicket for people actually, Nitesh Reddy is a good example of this, but Pat Cummins, Scott Boland, very sort of technically correct, watch the ball onto the bat type players who probably, when the ball is moving, are going to have slightly more issues. Here's Nathan Lyon's wagon wheel, just because how often do you get to show Nathan Lyon's wagon wheel? Look, he's scoring everywhere. I really like the one down to long on, by the way. He quite often plays drives in the air. and I think he would be a much better player if he didn't play that shot, but I love it each and every time he plays it. And the 10th wicket partnerships facing 100 balls for Australia. The interesting one I was thinking about for this is that the MCG, I feel like, has had a lot of great number 11 moments. So Mike Whitney facing Richard Hadley comes to mind. Jeff Thompson, Alan Border, almost stealing that test match. What was the other one I was thinking of? Oh, actually, it's on this list, isn't it? Mike Hussey, Glenn McGrath. I remember being there for that one and just being absolutely shocked. So the MCG does, it is, I'm just going to put this out there. It's a good pitch for number 11s. Head and Marsh about, this is what we're talking about, the inconsistent bounce. So both of these balls bounced at 8.4 meters. And Heads went to 90 centimeters. Part of the reason he probably sort of scooped at it a little bit. And Marsh's went 50 centimeters higher. That's a big, big difference from the exact same length. We saw Alex Carey's as well. I think this is one of the reasons. So there's some stats going around online about how the MCG is really hard to chase at. Most of those stats you could throw out because in the old days, the MCG was impossible to chase at because the ball used to run along the ground. They then got drop-ins, and we're kind of on the third generation of drop-ins at the MCG. The MCG is kind of almost like the pioneer of drop-in pitches around the world. And as far as a test venue, I know drop-ins actually come in through Kerry Packer's cricket, but MCG is sort of the first place to sort of really embrace that. And the first drop-ins were a bit weird and had this odd bounce about them. The next batch sort of got really, really flat for a long period of time. And then we sort of had these ones now that are zipping around everywhere. So there isn't really a consistent amount of data to suggest that this is easy or not. But when you look at this and you look at how much Australia struggled in this innings, there are things that go back into India's favour, like Mitch Stark's clutching at his side at one point. The fact that the spinners aren't of a lot of help and Mitch Marsh won't be able to bowl all that much, all those sorts of things. But there was plenty in this wicket for a chase of 300, even if Australia are making it harder. Like if Australia had declared with like 5 overs left to bowl, they would have given themselves 3 pops of the new ball at India. You know, 1 at night, 1 in the morning, and then with the second new ball. They've kind of taken that away in what they've done at the moment, but it also shows you they don't feel that comfortable, which is why all 4 results are still available to us. Draws 100 to 1. Ties 100 to 1, by the way. Marnus's innings, just quickly on this, was the thing that I found most interesting, again, is he's finally found some form. I thought he probably struggled more in this one. Like this was a real grafting innings, maybe more than most, even by his standards. But again, when he gets set, he then just starts dangling the bat outside off stump. And I don't know if teams have worked that out. But we've seen the 2 dismissals with Nitesh Reddy and then the Jaiswal drop. It's just like he just keeps doing it. It's a very, very interesting trend that is coming through when he seems to be batting a lot better. It was dismissed that way. It's dismissed that way again. Was that one I was thinking of? I can't remember this one. But there was the full one. Was that in Brisbane that I was thinking of? So short one, full one, and then was dropped outside off stump. So it's quite an interesting one that's happening. Pat Cummins scoring through the offside again. And Pat Cummins. Melbourne specialist with the ball, everyone was saying. Turns out it's with the bat. Most runs this series. Interesting to see Marnus up here at 224. And that's what we have for the scoreboard today. Remember to go and support bestofcricket.substack.com. Heaps of people have actually reached out to us saying that they didn't know that this existed beforehand and have very, very happy that we've been highlighting it. So I'm glad that they're having so much success. As I've said many times, I've been using it beforehand. They have the half-assed internet research here, and they're talking about Sam Constas, and this is the Wikipedia page where it says, he's the father of Virat Kohli and reprimanded his son for his behavior during the Boxing Day test match. Little bit disappointed that the person who did this did not capitalize Boxing Day or test. And they've also got their crossword. I think the Venn diagram of Uber cricket nerds and crosswords is probably going to be pretty high. So please feel free to head over there and support bestofcricket.substack.com. All right, let's take a break, and then when we come back, we'll have questions from the room to see exactly where our head is at and what we need to talk about, and throwing it ahead also to tomorrow. And that is why Nasser Hussain decided to bowl first at the Gabba. And this all, of course, reminds me of Hit Wicket, which is a mobile cricket strategy game that is all about making those tough decisions. Who do you want to send in as an opener when the asking rate is climbing? Do you go for the big hitter or the steady accumulator? Me, I like to throw in someone a little bit unorthodox. A bit of a wild card like the general. That keeps the opposition guessing. And what about the bowling attack? Do you unleash your express pace early or hold back for the death overs? I'm always tempted to bring on a mystery spinner in the middle overs and just try and break a partnership. Hit Wicket puts you in the captain's chair. You draft the squad and select the batting order and even decide when to use those game-changing abilities. Do you burn your 2x ability to chase down a big total or save it for a critical moment later on? It's strategic, it's addictive, and it's more nerve-wracking than facing a show-up actor bouncer. Give it a go. Download Hit Wicket and see if you've got the tactical nous to win. All right. Okay, we've got some questions. Varun, there we go. Rahul says, Australia undercomers are so defensive. Blocking out at the end of the day is strange. Yeah, they are. Been saying that for ages. You know, there are lots of people talking about the follow-on yesterday. Obviously, the game has changed massively since then. I was like, I just don't see this as a team that would do something like that. They've had a lot of success under Cummins, though. All right. We are in a very uber attacking situation. In my history of professional cricket, of playing cricket, of watching cricket, all these different things, bowling captains only ever come in two formats: overly aggressive and overly defensive. They see the game very differently to batters in many different ways. But yeah, I don't think the blocking out at the end of the day was strange, because they'd already made that call. But I thought it was a bit weird that they decided that they needed to keep batting at that point as well. Like, this was, they almost batted the entire day for very few runs, and they were still in a mindset of, oh, we can't give India too much time. Now, there is an element of, if you give India fewer overs, India might still go for the win and therefore bring about more wickets. But Australia was trying to defend, and they were finding it hard to defend on that wicket for a long period. So I'm not sure I 100% understand that. But yes, they're a defensive team under Pat Cummins. Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favorite newspaper, head to Cricinfo, and maybe a blog you'd like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Welcome back. Sorry about the Wi-Fi. I have Wi-Fi, I have backup Wi-Fi, I have triple backup Wi-Fi, and it's still nothing will go. Sure, it says, Jared, Bumrah has 200 wickets. Answer the question now. I'm going to need more than that. Yeah, but thank you. Simple Guy says, how do you rate Bharat Aaron's contribution as bowling coach in India's overall success with fast bowlers? Oh, look, I think a lot of things change with India. I don't want to be one of these people who just automatically give credit to one person, because I think it's fair to say that I think the way that India thought about fast bowling changed. You know, at one stage, their Ranji wickets were much more orientated to fast bowling as well. The MRF, Pace Academy probably has a big part to play. Having to find fast bowlers for your T20 franchises. All these things, I think, have played a part. But yeah, I think he definitely needs, I definitely think he needs a huge credit for everything he's been involved with. We don't, I think in cricket, we just don't really, we barely talk up coaches, and we don't really talk about the specialist coaches, and the bowling coaches even less so. So look, they're a very good unit and have been for a very long time, and he certainly played a huge part. Mr. Creator says Bumrah's pace went down during the last spell. So there's a couple of things that is worth remembering here. I did a podcast with Alex Judah, and he said, and he was lucky enough to have bowled in the era before the pace gun and after the pace gun. So he had the overlapping thing, and he said before you would amp up your speed and you would amp down your speed, and that was just how you maintained your bowling. Sometimes you would look at the conditions and you would be trying to do something specific, so you bowl a little bit slower, and then the captain might come to you and go, "Can this be the spell where you amp it back up?" Or the opposite might be like, "You don't need to bowl at your maximum pace here." All those conversations were had. We're now in a period where if you don't bowl at your maximum pace, everyone asks if there are issues and everything else. Jasper Bumrah is pretty clever, and I kind of feel that that while this is certainly an issue, that it's worth noting, like this is the second most balls he's ever bowled in a test match, and by tomorrow morning it might be the most. It's also worth noting that he, as a great fast bowler, he should actually be amping up and amping down his pace at various times for different reasons. And so when we get so focused with that, I think sometimes we're missing out. It's different if it's the Ollie Robinson thing, where we see someone getting tired and struggling to keep their pace up every time, right? In the second and third spells and the fourth spells. And then you have someone like Jasper Bumrah or Jofra Archer, who sometimes are going to bowl slightly differently because of conditions and everything else. Aditya says, random question. When I was growing up, the seagulls on the Aussie grounds were common. I don't see them anymore. We had them all killed. They had it too good for too long, Aditya. They have these things, and I think they have variations of this in other international grounds in the world, where there are like different ways of dissuading the birds from coming onto the grounds. So if I remember correctly, and I can't remember which grounds this is, but I know I've been in those grounds where they have like falcons and stuff flying out over flying around the ground. And I think at the MCG, and I'm pretty sure I'm right, and MCG was a big seagull ground back in the day. I think at the MCG, they have like these fake birds, and it's like the shape of a predator bird, but it's obviously not a real bird. It's more like an actual kite or something. And I know there are lots of different grounds who have different things that they set up to get rid of the birds, but that's only because it has been an issue. But it's not just in Australia. That's been a bit of a thing. But great question. Everyone else, what's going to happen tomorrow? This guy, where are the fucking seagulls? That's probably going to be a meme now, isn't it? Sorab says, what's her gut saying? My gut says that chasing 300 on this wicket seems really hard. I think if they'd bowled them out at 270 and given themselves 3.5 sessions, that would have been a very different conversation. But let's look at the advantages for Australia. The advantages for Australia, Saurabh, are that they probably should get between 25 and 35 overs of seam movement. And if they create anywhere near as many chances as India did, then it's going to be very hard for India. The other advantage is it doesn't seem like it's a particularly easy pitch to score on. The scoring rates seem to have slowed down a little bit at the moment. So again, it will be hard for India to catch up. The inconsistent bounce and sideways movement combination is kind of what the MCG has done towards the end of test matches. If that continues, taller Australian fast bowlers should be able to exploit that even more than the Indian bowlers did. So that's another issue. And then, as I said before, if India do need to score a little bit quicker and they do go for the win, that brings in, the chance of some easier wickets for Australia that they don't have to force. On India's side, if you can survive the first 35 overs, it looks like it gets much easier to bat, right? Like if you can get past that, when did, oh God, which scorecard do I have here? So if you look at the one today, so Alex Carey was dismissed in the 36th over. And so Australia have lost 3 more wickets over the next 40 odd overs, right? If India are not 6 down, but are 2 or 3 down, that becomes a lot more interesting. What else do I like? If Mitchell Starc, we saw him, pouring at his side, might be nothing, but that's interesting. Australia might be more willing to bowl Mitchell Marsh now because, his form with the bat isn't exactly demanding that he stays in the side. And if he's not going to bowl and he's not making any runs, like there is an element that they might risk him a little bit more. We haven't really seen much for the spinner. So Mitch Marsh might bowl a few extra overs, and because he's tall and the inconsistent bounce could help him. But Nathan Lyon at the moment doesn't look like he's going to get a great deal of assistance, and we're not sure 100% about Mitchell Starc. So I think there's a few different elements there that, again, go back into India's favour. India also have the double bubble, right? It's a win for them if they get a draw out of this from where they were, and it's a win for them if they get a win out of this. They're in a England moral victory territory here, and they've also got a bit of a free shot at going for the win. And by that, what I mean by that is they're massively behind in this game. They've clawed themselves back in to get them into a situation. Yeah, they've clawed them back into a situation where they can have a go and then keep the series open. Like even if they lose and they've gone for the win, then they haven't lost the series yet, right? So it's not as if this is it, and if you go for it, you can't draw the series. So they've kind of got, what did I say before, double bubble. They've kind of got a quadruple bubble, and that's the best kind of bubble. You can tell I'm sick. I'm just making up shit as we go now. Loxalotl says, does the current World Test Championship scenario pressure India to not play out a draw if it comes to that? If so, does that allow Australia to continue batting longer? I think Australia will want to win this test match as well. I haven't been looking, during the game, I'm not looking at the individual World Test Championship scenarios. I think Australia is more likely to put it into a position where it's hard for them to lose. And I think India is probably more likely to try and win based on the quadruple bubble theory that I just came up with a moment ago. Siddharth says, Bumrah and Siraj have massively overbowled. Siraj has gone underappreciated as well. Wish they'd picked a 4-seamer. Hard to see India chase this down. I'm not sure they've massively overbowled. As I said, they haven't really bowled that much more than Starc and Cummins, right? They've just bowled a lot. It's been a seam bowling series, and you've got seamers. Your 4-seamer is correct, but if you pick a 4-seamer, you are then saying we don't have any batting from number 8. They clearly don't feel comfortable. The way they've been batting of recent times, I can understand why they don't feel comfortable having a weak number 8. I always think that number 8 thing, and this is for another video for another time set up, but I always think the number 8 thing is a bit silly anyway. Like, if you have bowlers who can take 20 wickets consistently, the number 8 doesn't matter as much. But if you don't, then having a stronger number 8 is it going to make a big difference, right? Do you know what I mean? You'd still be better off to find 4 bowlers who can take 20 wickets, but that's not how teams think. I forgot what I was going to say. Nora says, if Rohit and Kohli retire soon, should Pant bat at number 4? Top 3, Jaswal, Gill, KL, Pant. Where are we? Nitesh, Washi, Akshar, 4 proper bowlers. I don't think. No, I don't like that. The number 4 issue is really interesting when Kohli goes, of who is going to end up there. But I don't see. I think Pant is much more suited to 5 and 6 than he is to number 4. So I wouldn't be looking at changing that. Also, don't think at the moment you want. So you've got Nitesh at 5 in this, do you? I'm not quite sure what your lineup is. But Nitesh, I don't think you can bet Nitesh at 5 at the moment either, unless I'm missing someone from your order there. Drew says, what is the overrate situation? I haven't really been following it. I worry about that at the end. India now haven't bowled out within 80 overs. Australia haven't bowled out within 80 overs. So they do, these two things do come in. It is interesting that, like, that's the, like in the old days, it was like, oh, second new ball, really interesting for the game. And now it's second new ball, really interesting for the over rates. How much things change. Rohit says, thoughts on batting order and how should all the top 6 go after the chase in ideal scenario? And will India take the extra risk considering World Test Championship? As I said, I think there's plenty of reasons why they can take the extra risks, even just from the series perspective, separate to the World Test Championship. But there's no doubt that Rohit and Virat want that World Test Championship. So that is will be a big thought on their mind. They can get really funky with the batting order. I just think they need to get through 35 overs. And however they think is their best chance of getting through 35 overs with as few wickets down as possible, whether that's attacking, whether that's defending, whether that's sending Washington up the order or Nitesh up the order or whatever, that's what they have to make the decision on. That's their chance of chasing this, really. I can't see how you can do it otherwise. You can see how you could draw because quite clearly, just put Mohammad Siraj in to bat for 3 hours. But I find it very hard to see how you win without conquering those first 35 overs. Bart says, is Akashdeep the modern pancake scene? No, look, I love Pankaj, and obviously, I think I've written more words on Pankaj than anyone else ever has. Pankaj was a very different kind of bowler in that he was an older bowler who was obviously quite smart and worked really hard, but perhaps was not quite as accurate as he needed to be. So I think his best ball was definitely test level, but he just couldn't repeat the balls as much as he wanted to be able to do. There's nothing that reminds me of Pankaj with Akashdeep. I think his best balls are really good. He doesn't bowl much trash. He's very fit. I think there's a lot of things in his favor that you wouldn't quite say with Pankaj. Not that I'll have a bad word said about Pankaj. Stag says, the lower order batting that is actually the higher order level. Should they reverse the batting lineup numbers? It just tells you how hard it is in modern cricket to survive the new ball. Look at some of those deliveries. I go back to that Usman Khawaja over. I just don't think Scotty Boland is going to be able to face the ball seaming 2 degrees every single delivery. Not that he would have edged it either. He would have been further away from it. But you know what I mean? Like, some of those balls are ridiculous. And the top order guys are being sent in a way that we haven't seen since ye olde English cricket, right? Like, it really is kind of like the top order is like the riot police who are just getting pelted with stones and everything. And then you have the regular police coming in later to sweep up and clean up. That's kind of what Test cricket has become in a lot of places at the moment. AJ says, I never felt that Cummins is a new ball bowler. Should always bowl at first change. I love the fact he bowls at first change, by the way. And one of the reasons I love that is because there aren't many specialists, like Joel Garner, Neil Wagner, Morne Morkel, and you go through the history of cricket, there really aren't that many specialist first change bowlers. And I always liked that he did that. I kind of think there has been a bit of a push recently for him to go back and to do more new ball bowling. When Stark sort of, has regained his form, I don't think it makes as much sense. But I always like the idea of using Stark for 3 overs early on. And if it's not looking like he's going to get a wicket, bringing Cummins on first change. And he's still getting the new ball. I don't think he's quite bowling at the level that he was at his peak. And at his peak, he probably got away with being a first change bowler a little bit more because it didn't matter when you threw in the ball. And at the moment, perhaps he needs a new ball a little bit more. But it doesn't really make any sense not giving Scott Boland the new ball, if we're being honest. Banterous Lemon says, the weather forecast for Melbourne looks cloudy tomorrow. Does the MCG pitch play differently on day 5 with cloud cover? The MCG is always a bit of a weird one because it creates a bit of a swirl within the stands. And so if you go back and you look at the history of cricket, there's a lot of swing bowlers who've done very well at the MCG without being particularly quick. So, I mean, Hadley's unfair, but, Steve Waugh, and domestically, people like, Ian Harvey, I think Andrew Simons took a bunch of wickets there once, nibbling the ball around. People like Ricky Ponting have come in and taken wickets, swinging it. So it's usually, I found with the MCG, cloud cover, whatever cloud cover means to the swinging ball, and that might be as much psychological as anything else. But when you look at the history of the MCG, I've always found when it's windy and swirly, there's an ability to do that. But people don't really try and swing the ball that much anymore. So it's not like the old days. And Australia, you're going to get, Stark will do it for a little while, but he's going to do it with a brand new ball anyway. I don't think swing's going to be a big part because I think they're going to be trying to get the ball to seam and inconsistent bounce. So I think it's more likely that they try and hit the surface than anything else. So I wouldn't, even if it did have a big say, it shouldn't have a big say tomorrow. The things that should have a big say for Australia tomorrow should be the new ball, extravagant seam movement early on, and inconsistent bounce. That's it. Well done. Punched you all out. Thank you. Many super chats. Thank you for the many super chats today. Sorry, we didn't do a morning glory as well. It's just because I've been a bit sick all test and a little bit worried about losing my voice. So we've been cutting the scoreboards a little bit shorter than normal as well. But thank you to everyone for coming on again. We will be back tomorrow probably for the morning glory, unless I'm really, really sick, but certainly for the scoreboard as well. Could be a fascinating day. As I said, I think the most likely scenario is Mohammad Siraj to make 40 not out, but run out Virat Kohli for a tie. But other potential results are also available. See you then. Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favourite newspaper, head to Cricinfo, and maybe a blog you like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Well, that is what the best of cricket is currently doing. They go out daily to find the newest cricket coverage and the best stories from any publication in the world. And when they can't discover what they want, they also hire some of the best writers to produce their own great stories. You can get the best of cricket via their website or on WhatsApp. They find cricket's best stories and give them to you every day.